What we found is a new species of fossil penguin, and it's really important scientifically because this is the only fossil penguin ever discovered that has feathers. So this tells us a lot about a very important part of the transition between a flying bird and an underwater diving bird. It's about 35 million years old, and the species name is Incayahu paracacensis. Incayahu means water king, and this was a very big bird. It was about almost 5 feet tall, easily weighing over 120 pounds, so much larger than any penguin alive today. And Paracacensis refers to the place we found it, the Paracas National Reserve in Peru, which is a national park. It's in a very arid desert, one of the driest places on Earth, but it also includes the offshore oceans, which is a very rich place for living birds, including penguins. So a lot of birds, penguins, seals, and whales live there today because of nutrient-rich currents that are coming up, bringing food with them. These animals are living off the coast, and they're doing just fine, even though there's not much going on in the desert itself. These penguins, actually, they lived in the ocean. We found the penguin in marine rocks, and so by looking at the types of fossils we find there, marine snails, crabs, and also the types of sediments, we can tell this was an ocean environment. And that's really interesting to us because fossil feathers are very, very rare from marine environments. All of the fossil feathers that are well known, the famous dinosaurs from China, the green river birds from Wyoming, these animals all lived in freshwater lakes, or died in freshwater lakes rather. And to find feathers in an oceanic environment is extremely exciting and very rare. The feathers give us a lot of information about how penguins went from being aerial flying birds to underwater divers. And before we had no data at all. And now we know that a lot of the important changes happened really early. Like I said, this penguin lived about 35 million years ago, long before the first humans appeared, and it already had a lot of the major features that make a penguin flipper unique. The feathers are very small on the wing. They're almost scale-like. The quill is really flat, very wide, completely different than the quill of a normal flying bird. And they're also packed tightly together, so there's hundreds of them forming little layers. And this makes the flipper very stiff, very resistant to water, which is hundreds of times denser than air. It's not good for flying through the air, but penguins don't do that anymore. It's very good for propelling yourself through the water. One of the cool things that we can infer now is we can actually get color for this fossil penguin. So there's melanosomes preserved in some of these feathers, and melanosomes are microscopic structures that carry pigment. And so they give color to things like bird feathers. To our own hair, we have melanosomes that give us pigment in our hair. And by looking at the sizes and shapes of these, we can tell a little bit about what the penguin looked like. Different types of melanosomes produce different types of colors, and when we looked at the fossil feathers, we saw evidence for the types of melanosomes that today make gray colors and reddish-brown colors. And so we think the penguin was partially colored in these two colors. And that's really unusual because when we look at living penguins, they're mostly black and white. So what the feathers tell us is that the changes in the basic shape of penguin feathers had already happened by the late Eocene. By 35 million years, we had the small, flattened, scale-like feathers in the wing. But there's important structural changes in the microscopic components of the feathers that give them both color and resistance to wear that didn't happen until sometime later. And so those are special features seen only in living penguins that Incayahu didn't have. One of the interesting things that the family tree that we made showed is that the closest relatives of Incayahu, who are also extinct, lived in New Zealand and in Antarctica. So we have other penguins from Peru right in the area where Incayahu lived, but they're not closely related to it. And this shows that the Incayahu group of penguins was very successful. They were able to spread almost throughout the entire southern hemisphere during the Eocene. And so this group was very successful, but for some reason or another, they didn't survive to the modern day. So all of these giant penguins are now extinct.